Hello and welcome to my very first stream / YouTube video. This evening we're going to be flying the Airbus A320 NEO from Amsterdam Schiphol, that's EHAM, to London Heathrow, EGLL, and we're going to be recreating a real world flight, a British Airways flight 441, which is scheduled to leave Amsterdam Schiphol at 7:25 local time. So we'll switch over to the sim and get things set up. So the departure airport is Echo Hotel Alpha Mike, and we are going to be starting from gate D28, which is where the flight left from today. Interestingly, the gates don't seem to follow any sensible order on here. You've got the letters and numbers all jumbled up. Never mind. And there's our line drawn between the two, but of course, being an airline flight, we're going to fly high altitude airways, and we'll let the in-sim flight planner plot us a route. Now, I did actually plan this route on SimBrief earlier on, which currently isn't importing terribly well. The flights will import, but as soon as you decide you want to start from a gate rather than the active runway, it loses the flight route that you've just imported. So what I'm using is sort of a hybrid. I've planned it on SimBrief and now I'm planning it in here. But what I'm going to do is take the SIDS and the stars from my SimBrief plan, and we will cobble something together that way. So we're going to be using the Vola 1 Papa departure. There it is, off runway 27. And we're going to be flying the Logan 1 Hotel arrival into Heathrow. And we're going to land on runway 27 right. So you may have noticed it's actually adjusted our route because it's such a short route. Over half of it is the departure and arrival procedures. So that is quite good. We're going to fly in live weather, but we are going to try and match the timings of the real flight as closely as possible. So if we're due to leave at 19:25, we'll make a start at 19:16. Aircraft is the A320 NEO, and the total fuel we need is 11,000 pounds. One day they will put kilograms in here, which will make things much easier. There we are, 11,256. Close enough. Close enough. Right. What do we need to do? We need to do the ATC options. So our tail number is going to be Golf Echo Uniform Papa Uniform, which I know is not a NEO, but it's what was flown tonight, and it's close enough for me. Flight call sign for Speedbird, flight number 411. Oh, correction, 441. Probably misnamed the stream. Never mind. And the final thing, which I learnt off Droya from his stream, is that you can make a note of the centre of gravity here, which is 21.8, and that will come in handy when we're programming the MCDU in a little bit. Right, I think we're set. Let's fly. So it does take a little time to load, particularly it seems when you're going to the handcrafted airports. It's a lot quicker in lighter planes and lighter scenery areas. So I should say at this point that obviously we're all very new to this simulator, and I don't anticipate everything going smoothly tonight. I've flown the A320 quite a lot, the FS Labs A320 on Microsoft FSX, and I'm reasonably familiar with it, but there are a few quirks in this model. Obviously it's a much simpler model in many ways, but well, to put it plainly, I don't really know what I'm doing with it yet. So bear with me, and we'll learn together, hopefully. I think for future streams I might skip the initial setup so that we start with the aircraft already loaded. This is not fun viewing for anyone. Aha, here we go. Right. Well, I'm ready to fly. I hope you are too. So here we are in the cold and dark Airbus A320 cockpit. I'll give you a quick spin around outside. You'll notice that there's a bit of stuttering, and this does get better as time goes on. Once you've been in the sim, it smooths out quite a lot. I assume that's to do with just having to load a lot of stuff in at the beginning. Right, let's get things underway. So the first thing we want to do is turn on the batteries.
Schiphol clearance delivery Speedbird
first error.
IFR to Heathrow,
I've still
ready
got
to
the co-pilot controlling my radio comms, and I'm not ready for this yet.
Take off runway 27, climb and maintain 14,000 feet. Departure frequency is 121.205.
Okay, so we've set the altitude. And what we'll do is we'll get back onto the radio in a little bit, although I will have to acknowledge that, otherwise they will pester me.
Speedbird 441 cleared to Heathrow Airport.
Right, where were we? Oh yes, we're looking at the overhead panel. We've got external power available, so we'll switch that on. We'll turn the fuel pumps on because the fuel is already loaded. We'll turn the nav and logo lights on because the aircraft's powered up. And we'll start the APU while we're up here, because we won't be hanging around at the airport for too long. Just bear with me while I sort a few windows out on my desktop. As I say, I've never streamed before, so I don't really know what I'm doing. Right. So now what we want to do is get passengers boarded. So we will ask ATC to attach the jetway. This is not the method I would choose to use to get a jetway attached, because it's not particularly realistic. But there is supposedly going to be a version of GSX, I should say, for Microsoft Flight Simulator fairly soon. So that will hopefully make things a lot smoother on the jetway baggage service. General airport riffraff front. Okay, that seems to know what it's doing, so we'll leave that be. So now we've got the aircraft powered up. Oh, as soon as the door opens you get a master caution warning, which doesn't seem quite right because, you know, we're not about to go in the air, so anyhow. We'll start programming the MCDU. So, because we used the in-sim flight planner, we already have the from and to on here. We're going to set the cost index, which is going to be 20 for the flight. And the cruising altitude I should have changed in the planner, but I think if I do it here it'll be just as good. We're going to cruise at 240 because that's the altitude that the real world flight cruised at today. Here we put in the zero fuel weight centre of gravity. Do you remember I mentioned making a note of that from the weight and balance screen. Yet I didn't do it. So that was a good piece of advice, not followed by me. I seem to remember it was 20 point something. So we will put in the zero fuel weight, and we will put in, let's go for 20.1. Block fuel is there. This is in kilograms. It would be nice, as I say, if the whole thing could be done in kilograms, but at least it does the conversion for you. So that's the init page done. We'll have a quick check of the flight plan. So we're going to be taking off from Amsterdam Schiphol runway 27. This is the standard instrument departure already programmed in, along with the altitude constraints. So that's 9,150 feet or above. And Idrid is to be passed at 21,800 feet or above. And if we go all the way through, the cruising altitude has not changed. And unfortunately, I don't think you can edit it other than in the init page, which obviously hasn't made a difference. Never mind. We will just ignore calls to climb beyond to 24,000 feet. Transition altitude is going to be 18,000. That's not true for this airport. It'll be, I think, 4,000 in reality. But for some reason in Flight Simulator, all airports have a transition altitude of 18,000, which is true for the States, but not so useful for Europe. The acceleration altitude is going to be 3,000. That's fairly standard. The thrust reduction altitude is where we reduce our thrust from takeoff power to climb power. And the acceleration altitude is where the airplane will decrease its rate of descent to increase its speed. We're going to be doing a flaps 1 takeoff with a flex takeoff temperature of 67. Right, I think that is us just about set up and ready to go. So we will go back to the ATC menu. We will ask for a jetway disconnection.
Schiphol ground Speedbird 441, could you please disconnect the jetway from the aircraft?
We will turn on the... Ooh, did I start the APU? I don't think I did. I just pushed the power button. Never mind. We'll turn on the beacon light, and we'll wait for the APU to power up before disconnecting external power and pushing back from the gate. Exciting. I'm not too sure how well modelled these ECAM displays are. Can we push engine and have a look at the APU status? No, because there's a separate APU button. It's been a while. I think that's in op. Yeah, never mind. Once the APU is up and running, this start button will say avail in green, so that shows the APU is available, which is all we need. So we'll turn on the APU bleed, which will provide air conditioning and engine bleed air. We'll turn off the external power. Let's have a quick look outside. You can hear the APU bleed air coming online there. So I'm using Navigraph on my iPad for charts, and I will have a quick look at it now to work out which way we need to be facing once we've pushed back. So we want to have our nose facing right if we're heading to runway 27. So there are two ways of pushing back. You can either call the ATC like we did with the jetway, or you can use Shift P. And I normally use Shift P because it's vaguely more realistic. You'll notice that the pushback tug is moving into position. So we'll get back into the cockpit, release the brakes, and get underway. I'm not going to be using ATC for this flight. I tried it earlier, I've had a few goes with it, and it's not dreadful, but it's not as reliable as I'd like it to be. I'm going to ask the tug driver to steer the aircraft to the right. There's no way I've found of doing this without using the ATC menu.
Schiphol ground Speedbird 441 requesting pushback tug to steer the aircraft to the right.
Speedbird 441, your request has been transmitted to the operator.
I didn't mean that, did I? I meant left. Never mind. We'll work it out. And while we're doing this, let's get the engines going. So turn this to ignition and start. Flick both the switches. Monitor the fuel flow and the N2 figure here. Fortunately, I've also got to look out the window to try and stop the pushback in the right place.
Schiphol ground Speedbird 441 requesting the end of pushback.
Speedbird 441
That'll
request
do.
to end the pushback received.
Again, GSX will be along or something similar to sort this out eventually. So you can see the exhaust gas temperature and N2 coming up, showing that our engines are coming online. Once they're up and stabilised, we will start taxiing. Going to have to work this out because, yeah, facing very much the wrong way here. But never mind. We'll take a left and go left again. Right, I believe those engines are stable. Yep, they are. So we will turn the engine mode selector back to normal. We will turn the APU engine bleed off and turn the APU off. Switch the taxi light on and make a gentle taxi to runway 27. While we're doing that, we'll set flaps for takeoff, so that's 1 + F. Push B to set the altimeter. And of course, being in Europe, we use hectopascals rather than inches of mercury. So this here should be taxiway Bravo, and the runway to our right is 18 left / 36 right. I'm going to cross over that a bit further up and make our way along to runway 27. We'll turn the flight director on. We've set our initial climb altitude, which is what ATC told us before I decided that I wasn't going to bother with ATC. But we'll let the aircraft climb to 14,000 and then we will climb higher at our leisure. So we're going to make a right turn onto, I believe, Echo 4 here. We should really turn the strobes on when crossing a runway, but you know, when we're not even bothering to be in communication with ATC, why bother? Nothing coming, that's the main thing. Slightly confused as to why lever climb is flashing here. I would expect that after takeoff. Oh well, we'll see what happens. We can turn on the weather radar now. Lovely clear skies at the moment here in Amsterdam. It's looking pretty good in London as well at the moment, but we're having very, very changeable weather here at the moment in Europe. So we shall see. So we're just approaching runway 27 here. Path seems clear of traffic. Okay, before we line up, we'll turn on the strobes and we will set the nose light to take off. Oops. These switches are very fiddly. Go. Still nothing coming. So we're rotating at 123 knots. When I've flown the FS Labs Airbus, I've always had a co-pilot thanks to FS2 crew. So I can sort of remember what I'm supposed to be doing, but I'm not absolutely sure what the co-pilot's supposed to be doing. Can't wait for the FS Labs buses to come over here. It'll be a whole new world. Right, landing lights on. Oh, there we are. We'll use the scroll wheel, that's easier. Strobes on, beacon on. I believe we're ready. So we'll stand the thrust levers up to about 50%, let the engine stabilise, and then increase the throttle to the flex detent, which I've missed. There we are. Manual flex 67. SRS auto thrust blue. And there we are, V1, rotate. Positive rate of climb, so gear up.
You were not cleared to take off.
And flaps up. And as we pass 1500 feet, we will move the thrust levers down to climb. There we are. we'll engage the autopilot, because that's how these things are flown. And the autopilot is a little jittery, but there you are. That's just this is day one, don't forget, day one of Microsoft Flight Simulator, and for a default aircraft it's really not bad at all. Let's have a little look outside, shall we? Lovely evening here in Amsterdam. And yeah, very, very powerful aircraft. Brilliant climb performance. I'm not certain that these changes in pitch attitude are that realistic. No. Look at the pretty scenery. So we are maintaining about 240 knots. Obviously there's a limit of 250 below 10,000 feet. And more or less a straight out departure. We just had a little turn to make. And I'll increase our altitude up to our cruising altitude of flight level 240. We've passed the transition altitude, so we'll set that to standard 1013. Already we're coasting out. By the Netherlands. Increase the range of the ND, so we've got a better idea of where we're going. Now that's interesting. I increased the altitude setting to 240, flight level 240, but it's levelling off at 14,000. I don't think that's right. I might be wrong, I might be misremembering, but I thought that if you increased the altitude during the climb before the aircraft reached it, and if there were no constraints in the flight plan, then it should just keep climbing without you needing to press the button again. Let's have a little bit of drone action, shall we? That was the wrong button. There we are. There's the drone. Sabra's external modelling of all their aircraft, but particularly this one, is just spectacular. And much as I'm looking forward to the FS Labs Airbus coming into Microsoft Flight Simulator, presuming it does, it doesn't look anything near as good as this. Really is a stunning sim all around. I've never seen anything like it. How are we doing? Just passing flight level 210. So I've been at this more or less all day. I've flown a variety of planes, hopped about different locations around the world, and I feel a little bit square-eyed from it, to be honest, but I thought if you can't do your first Twitch stream / YouTube video / whatever this ends up being on the launch day of this brand new flight simulator, when can you do it? So I've got the Streamlabs OBS on the side of my window. I seem to have one viewer, which is very exciting because I wasn't sure I'd have any viewers. But there's a little bit of a chance that that is me logged in from my iPad and not remembering. Is there anyone there? I'll take that as a no. That's okay. People can watch it afterwards. Fall in love with the fluent and competent streaming and flying and come back for the next one. Or not. It's worth a go. Worth trying these things, isn't it? So that constraint button will show us our altitude restrictions further up the route, which can probably be more clearly seen in the FMCS. Oh, I've suddenly got all my words muddled up. What's this thing called? So it's still expecting us to cruise at flight level 380, but it's such a short route that makes no sense. So we only really need to start worrying about altitude constraints when we get to Sabre, because obviously we're already below 24,700. But it will be upon us before we know it. It's only about 45 minutes in the air, this flight, if all goes well. So you can't actually go inside the cabin of the Airbus A320, but you can have a good old look through the windows. And it's quite convincing. You can see the distortion from the glass, which is a really nice touch. Perspex, I suppose. They look a bit weary, don't they? I suppose they're doing this day in, day out. And everything's less fun if you're getting paid for it, isn't it? So we should be able to set a lower altitude, and the aircraft should descend automatically according to its descent profile. But I don't know if that's implemented in this particular Asobo Airbus or not. We'll see. Last time I flew it, I was following ATC instructions, so it all worked slightly differently. Interior model's really nice as well. But I want beauty and functionality, and that's it's hard to come by in any sim. But I'd like to think we'll get there with this one. Oh, it is starting to descend of its own accord. That is good. I was too quick to judge. There should, of course, be a top of descent point marked on the plan, and I think that's why because there isn't. I think that's why I assumed that it wouldn't descend. But it is. Yay! And I've just realised I had my microphone muted for a long time. Never mind, you haven't missed too much. As you can see, we're descending. We had a little bit of bother with the autopilot deciding to climb apropos of nothing. And I was just commenting on how I can't get my head around the fact that you can fly anywhere in the world and you're flying over a real landscape is just mind-blowing. Right, after it messed up the managed altitude mode before, I'm a little bit reluctant to give it another go, but I will anyway. Because it's worked in the past and I'm sure it'll work again. It should obey the 250 knot below 10,000 speed restriction. What haven't we done? We haven't set up our auto brakes, so we'll do that now. And we will arm our spoilers. Speed brakes rather. No, it doesn't want to descend in this mode, so we will go with selected altitude to see if it does that properly. We'll turn on the landing system mode so that once the ILS is within range it should pop up here. A bit stuttery at the moment, I'm not too sure why that is. Could be London spawning in the distance. So we'd like to be at 7,000 feet by Lambourne. Let's decrease the range so we can have a better look at what's going on down here. Okay, so it's got an altitude restriction of 10,400 or below, I think that is. Down to 7,000. I fear this low sun is going to spoil our view of London a little bit, but I'll try and show you as much as I can. see the River Thames over on our left hand side there. And I'm going to spend most of the time in the cockpit because it pays to be on top of things. Let's give it another shot at managed altitude mode. I want to go up to flight level 184. Not allowed. So you can see over here, that's Canary Wharf. We've got London City Airport around here. Shard over there, so I've got Orbex London landmarks installed. They're not the greatest quality, but they do make the London skyline feel a lot more complete. I've never had London looking this good in a simulator, and nor have I had performance this good over London, so it really is the best of all worlds. So the aircraft has entered approach mode. You can tell that by the fact that it's decreased our speed to the stage 1 flap extension speed, which is what that green dot is about. And I'm looking at the approach chart as I fly. We need to be 6,000 and above at the next waypoint. Sorry, not the very next waypoint, but the one that is marked as D127 Oscar. And yet here it's saying 3,500. Strange. Okay, I'm going to extend the first stage of flaps now, because the descent is quite steep, so a little bit more drag would come in handy. Now you have North London. You notice that the both the localizer and the glide slope are available to us now, so that's good. And it's normal to be above the glide slope as you do this meandering S-curve. So we'll be coming back on ourselves slightly and descending at the same time. Let's see how the autopilot handles this S shape, which is more of a jagged nonsense on the display here. It might fly nicer than it looks, if that makes sense. Okay, I'm going to clear us to 3,500 now. Might need to use a little bit of spoiler to keep the speed down. So just to remind you, we've flown the Logan 1 hotel arrival, and this is the initial approach that follows on from that from Lambourne. Yeah, I'm going to put a little bit of speed brake in to increase that descent rate. Probably didn't need to, because we need to be above 3,500 as we make the right-hand turn onto final. As you can see, we're now at or around the glide slope height. It's not doing a bad job of flying this, actually. So just because it doesn't look quite right on here doesn't mean it's not going to fly it right. It's a lesson worth learning. Look at that, there's the BT tower. Battersea Power Station, I think, over here. Okay, I'm going to arm the approach mode. Yes, I believe that is Battersea Power Station. I think this is Victoria Station. This will be the Brighton main line. Okay. Right, flaps 2, gear down. We should be just about to turn onto final for runway 27 right. Nine nautical miles left to touchdown. Let me just check that I did set up the approach correctly. It wouldn't be the first time I haven't. Yes.
2,500.
Approach speed of 145, config full. Jolly good. Heathrow is just about visible here, but because of the low sun, it's not that easy to see. So we'll let the autopilot fly it down to about 1,000 feet, and then I'll take over and have a go at landing it. It's interesting, I was pretty reliable at landing the FS Labs A320, and I thought, oh, this will be a piece of cake, but of course it isn't. It feels completely different. And so basically I'm just managing your expectations. This may or may not go smoothly. It's been touch and go before. Flaps 3. And flaps full. Check the speed brake is armed. Yes it is. We've got auto brake set to minimum. Must turn those labels off. I quite like seeing what's going on around me, but yeah, it's not terribly realistic. Okay, let's disconnect the autopilot. Runway's in sight. Just. A little bit of stuttering. Slightly low.
300.
And not so much on the not as on the centre line as I would like to be.
200.
We've passed minimums. I'm going to go for it. It's not ideal.
100. 60. 50. 40. 30. 20. Retard. 5.
Reverses. Oh dear, there's a plane on the runway. Something else to think about for the next time I do a stream. If you're not going to use AI, if you're not going to use ATC, probably best to turn off traffic. Although I think that was another player, wasn't it? It wasn't AI. Well, welcome to London Heathrow. Get some lights sorted out. Strobe off. Oh, I didn't put the landing lights on. Dear, oh dear. Oh well, one less thing to turn off. And we'll taxi up to Terminal 5. Start the APU. Turn on the taxi light.
Turkish 1983 taxi to the gate.
Turkish 1983 taxi to gate. Echo 1 using taxiway. Alpha Kilo Bravo Lima 21 Lima 23 Mike.
So I have to say, I'm quite impressed with Asobo's renditions of Heathrow and of Amsterdam Schiphol.
Echo 1 using taxiway. Alpha Kilo Bravo Lima 21 Lima 23
Obviously, I think
Mike,
because we're used to having the fly tamper version of Schiphol, it probably doesn't look as good. Sorry, the Asobo version obviously doesn't look as good as that. But when you look at the alternative versions of Heathrow that we had for P3D and FXX, so the UK 2000 one and the Simwings one, they were both pretty good. They had features that this doesn't have. But I mean, I used to use the Simwings version, and it was kind of cartoony. It felt more alive, but the textures weren't as good. The colours were a bit too vibrant. So I'm relatively happy with this. If they put a few docking systems in and maybe added a few more ground markings, I think I'd be perfectly happy with this forever. Obviously, really, I'd like a flight tempo or a flight beam rendition of Heathrow and of Gatwick. Well, all the London airports, really. But the trouble is, because we've got a couple of all-right versions of both Heathrow and Gatwick, I think it's unlikely that they'll see it as a good business idea. Anyway, never say never. Don't be so defeatist, Philbert. APU bleed on. See, turning on the landing lights is very much a co-pilot job, not my fault at all. Can't be expected to do everything, can I? I do take responsibility for the landing, though. I can't pass the buck on that one. It was a little firm, and the approach was a little bit wibbly-wobbly. But there you go. It was a lot of fun in spite of that. Off, certainly the weather radar. Oh, these switches are fiddly. There we are. Taxi light off. I haven't found a way, even when using ATC, to select your own gate on arrival, which is a shame because the marshallers are actually worth having. I mean, obviously here there's automatic docking systems, but in general, I'd rather have a marshaller than nothing. But I also want to park at a realistic gate that is at the right terminal and could potentially be used by the airline I'm simulating. So we'll just guess a stop point, which I think is about here. Let's go and have a little look. Oh, wrong button. It'll do, won't it? I mean, the plane on the right there's parked at exactly the same position. Right, so we have our APU on. Engines off. Beacon off. Nav and nav lights stay. Nav and logo lights stay on. Oh. Okay, I did have my landing lights on. What was I thinking? It's been a long day. Next time we'll get everything right. Now let's see if we can get the old jetway docked, and then we'll call it a night.
Heathrow ground Speedbird 441, could you please connect the jetway to the aircraft?
Speedbird 441, the jetway is going to be connected.
And there you have it. Welcome to Heathrow Terminal 5. And thank you very much for joining me on this first ever stream. I hope you have enjoyed it. And I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Take care. Bye bye.